In this video, I'm going to share with you 13 killer e-commerce marketing strategies, tips, and tricks. If you have an e-commerce store or business, you're not going to want to miss this one. So let me show you how it's done. E-commerce marketing and e-commerce in general is one of the most complicated and also most competitive fields in all of business and marketing. That's why in this video, I'm going to share with you 13 of my best tips, tricks, and strategies that I've learned over the last 10 years of doing e-commerce marketing and consulting with some of the top e-commerce brands in the entire world. From small solopreneur shops all the way up to billion-dollar empires and pretty much everything in between. So hopefully you're going to be able to take at least a few of these different strategies and apply them to your e-commerce store or business. But first, a big thank you and quick message from this video's sponsor, Omnisend. Omnisend is an e-commerce marketing platform built for nimble e-commerce marketing teams who want to increase their sales, not their workload. With pre-built e-commerce automations, email templates, and no-code drag and drop editing, merchants can get started right away and evolve as they grow. This means there's no need for costly subscriptions to multiple platforms. Simply start adding channels like SMS and push notifications while creating personalized messaging with data-driven segmentation, all from the same platform. Make sure to learn more about Omnisend by checking out the link in the description below this video. All right, so with that said, let's start with tip number 1, which is all about variety and novelty. You see, one of the most important concepts in all of marketing, not just in e-com, is understanding how the human mind, the brain, reacts to things like novelty and variety and newness and uniqueness and essentially things that are different from what we might expect. Well, the way the human brain reacts is quite positively, essentially allowing it to stand out and to get more attention and to be remembered better, because we're primed as a human species to essentially love and seek out and get a dopamine hit from novelty, from variety, which means that the cardinal sin in marketing, and especially when it comes to e-commerce, where the world is your competition, well, that cardinal sin is looking the same, or boring, or bland. So what do? Well, you take a look at your competitors, at others in your space, find out what they're doing, and then see how you could do it different, but better. But mostly just different. You do not want to become a commodity. You don't want to be perceived as doing the same thing or offering the same thing as everybody else with no unique or differentiated aspect, because if that happens, well, the only thing you're going to be able to compete on is price. And if you have to compete on price, then it's going to be this lose-lose race to the bottom, with everybody slashing prices, trying to become the cheapest, and the first person to get there essentially loses. Actually, the second person to get there loses, because being the second cheapest is the world's worst competitive advantage. I guess you could call it a competitive disadvantage. If you're brand new to the world of marketing and of branding, make sure to check out a book by Marty Neumeier called Zag, which essentially sounds pretty much like exactly what it is. When everybody zigs, you zag. All right, tip number 2 is all about personalization. Now, it's no secret in the world of business and marketing that the most important word out there is you. This is because to our customers, to the people that we're selling to, they are the most important person in the world, at least to themselves. And as they're making a purchasing decision, we want to reinforce that. We want to remind them of why they're important, acknowledge their existence, acknowledge their buying power, and respect that. Now, there are a ton of different tools and software out there that can help you. In fact, all you really need to do is go to Google and type in e-commerce site personalization, and you're going to find more than you could ever hope for. But the important point to remember is to try to find those key areas of connection that allow you to really connect with the people that you're trying to serve. So do you serve a very specific niche or sub sort of group, or do you serve a specific area or specific interest? And what are the attitudes and beliefs and values that they have, that you can resonate with them? And of course, you can always resort to using things like their first name once they join your mailing list or make a purchase, or acknowledge some other aspect of their personality or something that you can glean from their data. All right, tip number 3 is all about doing split tests. Now, again, very, very important in the world of digital marketing in general, not just for e-commerce, to do split tests, also known as A/B tests, also known as multivariate tests. A whole lot of different names for basically putting two things against each other, 2 or more, and having them kind of battle to the death to find out which one is better, which one is going to convert higher and get you more sales. Anything and everything you do with your e-commerce store and and business should be based first on research and solid marketing fundamentals and principles. But then once it's done, you want to back that up by testing everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. I'm talking about placements of images and videos. I'm talking about headlines, product descriptions, features and advantages, and bullets, and testimonials, and risk reversals, and everything else that I'm going to talk about through the rest of this video. Now, one very, very important note when it comes to split testing, and that is you need to make sure you have sufficient data for a statistically significant result. Essentially, you can't put up two different sales pages and have this one make 3 sales and this one make 2 sales and declare this one the winner, because that's not statistically significant. Without getting too nerdy here, what you're looking for is something called p-value. P-value stands for probability value, which is essentially how probable or how likely would this have occurred randomly versus as the result of your test. 3 sales versus 2 sales is pretty random, whereas 300 sales versus 200 sales is getting a whole lot closer. 3,000 sales versus 2,000 sales, even better. 30,000 sales versus, you get the picture. All right, tip number 4 is to hook them. Now, it's no secret that humans in general have shortened attention spans, and nowhere is this more evident than online, especially when that back button is just a click away. This is why it's incredibly important to hook them quickly by diving right into the problem, more on that in just a second, and really calling out your buyer and the benefits of what you're selling. The first 5 words, or the first things that a client or customer is going to see when they visit your store, are of paramount importance. It is so incredibly important to make sure you've got that dialed in so that the first thing they see, all of the content above the fold on your website and on your store, really calls to them. It acknowledges that they're in the right place, that what they've clicked is sort of taken them to where they are, and that they're going to get what they're after. Because again, if they don't, they're gone. They probably ain't coming back. And that leads me perfectly to tip number 5, which is all about problems first, headlines. Let me explain. Essentially, in marketing, one of the oldest pieces of advice is to always talk about the solution, and always talk about the end state, and always talk about all of the benefits that someone's going to get as a result of purchasing from you. However, what they often fail to recognize and fail to acknowledge is that solutions on their own, in isolation, are pretty much meaningless. This is because if you haven't spent time really identifying or clarifying or solidifying the problem to which the solution is there to solve, well, it's not really a solution because they don't know they have a problem. Make sense? This is why one of the best things you can do, and one of the reasons that this kind of headline works so well, is to identify the problem first by really clearly calling out what it is that your product, that your solution is going to solve for them. The easiest way to do this is to simply ask a question, saying, do you have this problem? Well, we have this solution. Now, I appreciate on the surface, that sounds really simple, really easy. And the reality is, it can be. Man, it also works. You see, when I'm doing an audit of an e-commerce store or shop, way too often am I confused by the level of creativity that the store owner is trying to get across, essentially sacrificing clarity in favor of creativity, thinking it makes them look cute and clever and creative, when in reality it's just confusing people. And confused people don't buy. They just leave. So where do you present the solution? Well, my friend, that's the next tip, which is all about having an irresistible offer. One of the biggest factors for making a sale in your e-com store is going to come down to the quality and the perceived value of your offer. Notice how I didn't say cost of your offer, I said value of your offer. This is because the value, the perceived benefits that someone's going to get from the solution that you're selling to help them solve the problem that they have, needs to be far greater than the cost of what they're going to have to pay. The larger the gap between the value they're going to be getting and the cost they're going to need to pay, the more irresistible the offer. But there's also a whole lot more to it than that. And this leads me to my next tip, which is all about having benefit bullets. Now, if you've had an e-com store for any length of time, or you've downloaded a template, or you've looked at your competitors, I can guarantee you've seen bullet lists, which are essentially different numbers of features and advantages and benefits and all of the things that they're going to get as a result of buying whatever it is that you're selling. They're called bullet lists because they're structured with bullets. All right, so to help get you started writing more effective and higher converting bullets, here are a couple tips. The first of which is that you always want to try to sell a painkiller and not a vitamin. A painkiller essentially alleviating some kind of problem that they have right now, instead of a vitamin which is going to solve some kind of problem in the future. The reason this is important is because humans, us, me, you, anyone we're trying to sell to, well, we're historically very bad at imagining future outcomes and future situations. It's why we put things off and why we procrastinate on our goals and our dreams, and why we seek kind of short-term amusement and short-term gratification. So whatever it is that you're selling, find a way to highlight the benefits that they're going to get right now. The next piece of advice is to structure it using the FAB framework, known as feature, advantage, and benefit. To help give you an example of what this looks like, let's use this pen. Well, the fact that it has a pen lid is a feature. I mean, it's just a lid. But the advantage is that, well, it's not going to get ink all over me if I happen to drop the pen. The benefit is I can write calmly and cleanly, carry it with me, and always have a pen handy. Want another example? All right, well, let's double down on the pen lid. You see, the pen lid actually has a number of different holes at the end of the lid, and these would be features. Now, what you may not know is that these holes are there for a very, very specific reason, and that's actually to prevent someone from choking to death should they happen to swallow the pen lid. That's the advantage. The benefit? Not dying. All right, let's move on to tip number 8, which is all about social proof. In his groundbreaking book, Influence, Dr. Robert Cialdini identified a number of different triggers that caused people to take action or to buy or to essentially be influenced. And one of them, and perhaps one of the most important, was social proof. Essentially looking to others around you for kind of a guide or kind of a reference for what you should do. Well, your customers are no exception. And they're looking for social proof when they're trying to make and trying to evaluate different information and trying to decide what to buy and what not to buy. This is why having things like testimonials and case studies and statistics and reports and anything else that's going to confirm that buying from you is the right decision, well, it's just so important. If you care to engage me in my marketing nerdiness for just a second, the reason that this works is actually based on something called the mimetic theory of desire. The mimetic theory of desire is an explanation of human behavior, which comes from French polymath René Girard. Here's what he had to say on it. Man is the creature who does not know what to desire, and he turns to others in order to make up his mind. We desire what others desire because we imitate their desires. Essentially, we want what other people want because we don't really know what we want. That's okay, but we need to understand and accept this, and we need to validate other people's wants by showing them how other people have wanted it too. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's move on to tip number 9, which is probably the single biggest recommendation I could ever hope to make to you, and is the one that has had the biggest and most profitable impact on pretty much every single store I've ever worked with, and that is email marketing. Yes, as boring or bland or old as it may seem, email marketing is still my secret weapon when it comes to making more e-commerce sales. It's allowed me to take a number of different e-com businesses from 6 to 7 figures, 7 to 8, and even implemented with different multi-million dollar and even billion-dollar e-commerce stores. The reality is that email marketing works, and it works incredibly well. I mean, just think about it for a second. Pretty much all of your customers have email and use email. So why aren't you using it as much as you should? The key with email is to do it well and to do it strategically and to walk that fine line and that balance between being overly pushy and salesy, but also providing value, but also providing a return on investment. And it can get a little tricky, which is why you do want to map out a complete strategy, including an autoresponder sequence as well as strategic broadcasts. But if there was one thing that I could suggest to really help take it up a level, it would be this next tip, which is story-based emails. You see, when it comes to email marketing, simply providing the standard HTML template with the banner at the top and a few product descriptions and blasting it out is average at best. And you can do better. This is why the strategy that I've used over the past 10 years and is responsible for generating countless millions of dollars for my clients has been largely a story-based email strategy. Essentially providing some value, telling a bit of a story, and then injecting the product into the email itself so it naturally sells itself and overcomes any objections in advance. Also, when done well and when mapped out ahead of time, you're able to introduce a concept known as open loops, which is essentially where each email builds on the next one, sort of telling a story that never really ends. Think of this for a second like a TV series where the last episode says to be continued, and you've got to wait until next week for it to be released. That is before the days of Netflix when you could just binge watch entire seasons. Well, what this does is it takes advantage of a psychological phenomenon known as the Zeigarnik effect. You see, what the Zeigarnik effect tells us is that we remember things until they've been completed or until we have closure. For example, there was a study done on servers at restaurants and how they were able to remember people's orders right up until the point that the order was actually delivered, at which point they promptly forgot. Well, this same thing happens with story-based emails. By keeping an open loop, by not completing the story or giving everything away in that single email, your prospect, your customer, is more likely to remember and to be intrigued and enticed to come back and check their email the next day. When they do, your open rates increase, your click-through rates increase, and most importantly, your sales increase. All right, next let's move on to tip number 11, which is perhaps one of the most important factors in all of marketing, and that is scarcity. Again, this one kind of ties into social proof, but more so on the fear of missing out or the fact of losing something that other people have that you just can't get. This is why if you're able to bake in some element of scarcity or urgency or limitation or exclusivity into your e-commerce offers, your rates of success, your conversion rates, your sales numbers have nowhere to go but up. Now, you can do this through limited time offers, through limited number offers, through bonuses that are there for only a short period of time, anything like that. But the important thing here is it has to be authentic scarcity, genuine scarcity. We can't simply say 24-hour sale only and then have that sale go on for days and weeks and months. Because not only is that incredibly unethical, it'll also destroy your brand and destroy your reputation. But you're not just limited to scarcity in order to increase your sales. There are other strategies you can use, including this next one, which is all about risk reversal. Risk reversal, especially in e-com, and especially if you have a new or relatively unknown store or brand or reputation, is incredibly important to allow people to feel safe and comfortable about purchasing from you. This is why it's important to have things like clearly laid out guarantees and clearly laid out payment terms, as well as structuring exactly what they can expect next and at every stage of the process. You do not want your customers guessing, or worse, hoping that things are going to work out like they think they will. The more risk that you can take on yourself as the entrepreneur, as the marketer, as the store owner, well, the higher your conversion rates are going to be. All right, tip number 13 is all about assumptions. And this one is kind of a mix between a marketing strategy and a copywriting tip, but it's essentially to inject the tone or the personality of assuming and essentially future casting the sale. Let me explain what that means. You see, one of the biggest mistakes that people make in marketing and in business and in life in general is trying to come off as too needy or too desperate or like they need to make the sale. Well, when that attitude is perceived by your customer, they back away, their guard goes up, and they immediately reject it. They don't want it. The flip side of that is to know that what you're selling is really, really good and it can really, really help them. And when you do that, and when you have a firm belief in what it is that you're doing and what you're selling, it comes across in all of your marketing and in all of your copy and in your headlines and in your offer and on your sales page and in your bullets and everything that you do, essentially allowing you to assume that the natural conclusion for your customer and your visitor to make is to buy your stuff. Now, like all things, the devil's in the details, and there is a bit of a balance here between being confident in what you sell and not being arrogant or snobby, because that's just gross too. The big thing with assumptions is to really feel confident in what it is that you're selling, to really stand behind it, basically leveraging all of the things that we've talked about up until this point. All of those will help, but I've got one bonus tip I want to share with you as well that I simply couldn't ignore, and that is the call to action, or CTA. Regardless of what kind of business or market or industry you're in, a call to action is always important. But when it comes to your e-commerce store and your e-commerce business, a call to action is mandatory, and without it, you're going to go out of business very, very quickly. So what exactly is a call to action? Well, it's essentially telling people what they need to do next and spelling it out in very clear, very certain terms. I'm talking about click this button to buy now. That kind of clarity. Literally walking them through exactly what to do next, how to purchase, and what they can expect, including showing very clear layouts on the sales page, explaining shipping details, talking about any other policies that you have, outlining the guarantee, and again, of course, always ending with that call to action. Never some weird ambiguous thing like visit our Facebook page or follow us on Instagram or download our lead magnet or multiple different calls to action. You want that one crystal clear thing that says, buy this now. You also want to try to reduce as much friction as possible, meaning that when they click buy this now, they don't have to go through a 10,000 step sales form with different pages and orders, all of which are going to give them options and opportunities to get distracted and to hit the back button or to just put it off for later. When it comes to doing e-commerce sales, what they put off till later typically ends up being put off forever. And that's not good for anyone. Of course, one very important thing that I forgot to mention is none of this is important if you can't even get someone's attention in the first place, which is why the next thing you're going to want to do is check out the video I have linked up right here on how to get more attention for your business. So make sure to check that out now, and I'll see you in the next video. First thing that you need to do in order to get attention is to understand one of the most important fundamentals and principles when it comes to marketing strategy, and that is specialization.